So I'm particularly going to concentrate on comparing our management of agricultural water quality issues and port derived, because that's the interesting thing that's going right on this space at the moment. I'm going to put up a lot of numbers. Why am I putting up numbers, amounts of sediment and other things? Because there's been a concerted misinformation campaign going on from both government and the mining industry about these numbers. And yet the numbers are all in peer-reviewed publications. They're in government reports like the strategic assessment. They're all out there, but at the same time, we have ministers, I'm afraid, plus Mineral Council people misrepresenting these numbers over the last months regularly and all the time. So I'm going to put them up in coloured lights here, and these numbers are all obtainable through peer-reviewed publications and actual official government reports, both state and federal. So there's no real argument about them. Anyway, the Great Barrier Reef, I won't talk about the Great Barrier Reef except to say it has a big catchment there on the other side, landward side, that has a lot of different agricultural industries, particularly grazing, beef grazing and sugarcane and so on. And more than 90% of the catchment is used for agriculture. And on the other side there, I've highlighted we have five major ports, all of which are in the process of or being planned to be greatly expanded. Some of the expansions will go ahead and others may not, but they're all in plan to be expanded. And of course, we have lots of good things in the Great Barrier Reef, like coral reefs and seagrass and dugongs. The catchment in 200 years ago was covered in forest, rainforest, forest, woodland and grasslands. Those all the greeny sort of colours of various sorts of natural vegetation. In the last 150 years, we've cleared much of that vegetation. You can compare the two there, and you'll see those sort of, I don't know what it looks like up there, but anyway, the sort of buffy purpley colour is where it's been cleared basically for grazing. And at the same time, that natural vegetation's been replaced by agricultural activities, grains cropping, sugarcane along the coast and beef grazing are the ones you can see at this scale. Most of the other things are too small to see here. There are some urban areas, small ones, like Townsville, and there's horticulture and other things, but you can't see them at this scale. So big changes. Those changes have led to large increases of the amount of things we'll call contaminants, I guess, coming out of the catchment, sediment 3 to 5 times as much. Why is there a range there? Because we're trying to model the change since 1800. What was happening in 1800 is a bit fluffy, and so we have a range. We know what's happening now, how much is coming out, but we don't really know how much was coming out in 1800 within a great deal of certainty. So these are ranges: nitrogen many times, phosphorus many times, and of course pesticides as well, and there was no natural load, so they're absolute increases up to about 28 tonnes per year now of the ones we look for, and we don't look for all of them. These mainly discharge to the Great Barrier Reef in the wet season during major river flow events. We can see there the Mary River, Burnett River, and up here further the Fitzroy River discharging there. And the flood plumes from those discharges travel hundreds of kilometres up the coast and affect large parts of especially inshore, but even offshore parts of the Great Barrier Reef. They have direct effects, obviously, like killing the coral straight out in the Keppels there a couple of years ago, covering them with mud as well. And what I'll call indirect effects, crown of thorns. I don't want to talk about crown of thorns at length, but we're in our fourth wave, as Terry mentioned. It's linked, we're fairly certain, to increased nutrient discharge from the land. Removal of fish predators may also play a part. It's a high cause of coral mortality and we're in the fourth wave again now, and we can expect further mortality of coral in the central Great Barrier Reef from those crown of thorns, which have now appeared off Townsville, I believe. Maybe Jamie Oliver will talk about that, I don't know, but and anyway, they're eating away. Right at the moment, they're eating the coral. And that'll continue for some time. What have we been doing about land runoff? Well, we've had lots of science, consensus statement, and then eventually, through one person, a wonderful Minister for Environment we had called Robert Hill, we got to Reef Plan in 2003. We have a plan to manage water quality for the Great Barrier Reef, or at least terrestrial runoff. And then that got funded under the Rudd government to $200 million with some more money from the Queensland Government, and we started work in 2008 to do something. We've had more science and more consensus statement and more updates of the Reef Plan up to last year, and we have a commitment now from the previous federal government, but supported by the current federal government for expenditure of $200 million over the next last year and over the next 4 years, and we have some support from the current Queensland Government to continue its actions as well in terms of better management practices in agriculture. So that's quite positive. And we've had some success in the first 5 years of doing something. Over 2009 to 2013, and the report came out a couple of weeks ago, it's called the report card, and total nitrogen is down by 10%. I'm going to say some success, and I'll emphasise this later. The target was 50% by last year. We got to 10%, so not exactly outstanding success, as the government might be telling UNESCO, but it's some success. We've now revised those targets, since we didn't even vaguely meet them, out to 2018, and we've reduced them. That's not commonly known. The new nitrogen target is only 36% reduction compared to 2009 from the 50% one we had originally. We've reduced the target. Suspended sediment, we reduced it by 11%, about 600,000 tonnes, and that's an important number as well when I come to dredge spoil shortly. And the new target is still 20% reduction only by 2018 now. And herbicides were reduced by 28%. The target was 50, so we made some pretty good progress there, and the new target is a little greater than the original one, went from 50 to 60% for somewhat unknown reasons. But anyway, so we've had some success, that's all I'll say, some limited success in managing agricultural pollution. But it's not outstanding success. However, at the same time, and I won't go into this, the place is falling apart. The coral's disappearing and the seagrass is disappearing, the dugongs are disappearing, and as a number of other speakers already have said, it doesn't look very good. Whatever we've been doing, it hasn't been perfectly working. And I won't go into this, somebody will talk, Jamie maybe will talk about this, but the coral cover's going down more than 50% too. We know it was, the baseline was in 1986 was 28%, you'll see up there, used to be higher than that. So it's gone down more than 50%, I'm going to say, I'll claim. And it's continuing to go down, and those numbers you see in the D'Arth et al. Paper, mainly mid-shelf reefs, same things are happening on inner-shelf reefs, and the marine monitoring program that AIMS run on inshore reefs by Angus Thompson showing the same sorts of effects in there as well. So coral's not in great shape. I won't go into detail here. Seagrasses, there's a little bit better news for seagrass right now because we've stopped having major floods just for 1 year, so that's helped. But anyway, seagrass is not in great shape in any sense. Maybe it'll recover. It's much more ephemeral than coral and comes up and down, but the story for seagrass is pretty dramatically bad as well. And we put all this together, that's been put together in the Outlook reports. There's a new Outlook report, I believe, coming out. Well, I know is coming out shortly. We'll have to wait and see what that says. And a paper we wrote some years ago and lots of things. And Terry pointed out these as well: coral, dugong, seagrass, sharks. We've got crown of thorns, we've got increasing inshore turbidity, papers that just came out recently, coral diseases, that'll be talked about, and declining calcification as well. So the system's in, despite whatever management we're doing, the system's in poor shape. With respect to water quality, we know that the main problem is about agriculture. Just read the yellow parts at the top there. We know the trends are down for GBR ecosystems, and that's due to continuing poor water quality and the cumulative impacts of climate change and seemingly increasing intensity of extreme events, cyclones and the like, and floods. And down at the bottom, the main source of the water quality issues at the moment, right now, are still agricultural, from sediments, pesticides, nutrients from agriculture. So that's the consensus statement from last year. We're not saying ports are the major problem at the moment, but they're really important words, at the moment. I'll just go through, this is my take on why have we failed. And I was at the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority for, a long time, 11 years, so I failed. I think we tried to manage tourists to death for a while there, and that wasn't the main problem, and anyway. And we only really started to manage fishing well, I would have thought, in 2004 with the rezoning. Terrestrial runoff in 2009, pretty recent times. Pesticides are still unmanaged in Australia, basically. And climate change we're not doing much about. And now we have port development being managed in an atrocious way. And part of our issue is getting the science together in such a way that we can really get policymakers to act, I suppose. Now let's go on to the dredging. And here I've got numbers highlighted. And what I want to do start with is the agriculture part, the numbers. The average annual suspended sediment discharge to the Great Barrier Reef is 9 million tonnes on average each year. The anthropogenic component of that 6 million tonnes, 3 million is what we'll call natural erosion. And Reef Rescue, as I said a little while ago, has reduced that by 620,000 tonnes, 10%. Of the 6 million tonnes, because that was the 10% reduction is in the anthropogenic load. Now some numbers that somehow seem to be strangely changed when they're in public. The dredge spoil amount to be dumped over the next proposed to be dumped, we don't know what's going to happen, is 100 million tonnes. You can calculate that out of the Marine Park Authority's strategic assessment that's in there, it's written down. No, I think at their numbers 90 something or other, but anyway, let's not worry about the details. These are all round numbers. If that happened over the next 10 years, and much of it won't, but because a lot of the proposals I don't think will go ahead, but anyway, if they all did, that's 10 million tonnes a year. The anthropogenic component from agriculture is 6 million tonnes per year. There is no way that what's coming from ports is any small proportion of what's coming from agriculture. In fact, it's almost double. And we know that that's happening under shocking governance arrangements that I'll talk about in a moment for ports. That's been pointed out now wonderfully in Gladstone by an official government review that the management in Gladstone was, well, flawed, terrible, poor. Federal government oversight was hopeless. And this is from a report that had very tight constraints and still came out. It was the first one that wasn't a whitewash, I believe, and it's pretty damning. And then, of course, we've had courtesy of freedom of information requests to Grumpa. We know now that the management arrangements, governance at Abbott Point were, how can I put it kindly, less than optimal. Could have been improved, I think. Modelling. The thing that's come out in the last week, the modelling review done by Miles Finesse and Richard Brinkman and AIM is damning of the sediment transport modelling done at Abbott Point by the consultants to the developer. It's just, they're laughable modelling that wouldn't pass muster 20 years ago, much less now. So let's have a look at that failure of governance because that's what my conclusions. Gladstone, well, remember there was large-scale dredging for some coal seam gas terminals on Curtis Island. That was coincidental with some huge fish and shark and prawn disease outbreaks. However, the compliance monitoring was so flawed that I don't think we can even tell. I might say that it's likely that those fish diseases were associated with the dredging, but you can't tell because the monitoring was so poor that the data collected was insufficient to ever really lay that to rest one way or another. No matter what people say that definitely wasn't due to that, there is not enough evidence to make that statement in any way. And of course the government review I just talked about slams the environmental management regime in Gladstone. Abbott Point. Well, we're about to, if that goes ahead, dump 3 million cubic metres out in the park there. We don't exactly know where yet even, somewhere out offshore there, inside the park. That's about 5 million tonnes. There were many options open at Abbott Point. Long jetties and no dredging, medium length jetties and a little bit of dredging. The one in red's what we got. Dredged 3 million cubic metres and put it behind a small bund wall, not the big bund wall that they looked at, which wasn't necessary, and land disposal. And you'd hope that these options were looked at in some scientifically open, transparent, robust way. Of course they weren't. The MC multi-criteria analysis was done, dominated by developers, consultants, and the developers themselves, and the state government, which is a proponent as far as I'm concerned in the Abbott Point, and some people from a few other people. And so the obvious decision was got to quite quickly really, dump it in the marine park. None of the others were even ever considered properly. And that's what I'm saying there really. And we know that now partly. I always knew it because I had leaked documents to me already, but we know that officially now because the Grumpers permit assessment is now leaked, or not leaked, open out there. The modelling's reports out there that I talked about. And in the end, the cheapest, quickest, dirtiest option causing the most damage to the Great Barrier Reef was chosen in place of options that would have allowed the port to go ahead but not cause the same level of damage to the Great Barrier Reef. And now we've got court cases going on and all over the place against that. And you don't think UNESCO aren't totally aware of that fiasco going on in Abbott Point? They are. So comparison of management to finish up with. Agricultural sources, we've had some success, but remember it's limited success. Port sources, it's a failure. And it's due to a lack of governance again. And I think we can do ports okay. That's the sad thing. It's not impossible. It's just that we're determined not to. And the federal government and the state government are determined not to govern ports properly. So I'll finish off by saying, where are we going now? Well, my impression is, and I know some of the people in UNESCO involved, what do they want from the Australian government and the Queensland government on the side? They want to see evidence of good governance in the ports. Do you think Australian government's really going to do that? I don't think so. And so it will be entirely expected if UNESCO do put it on the World Heritage in Danger list on the Great Barrier Reef. And I might just finish with that.